How could my daddy's head be so fragile? And at first, and sometimes still, I'm haunted by the idea that someone's head could just smash.
You chose to handle a deadly weapon without a care who was around. Your choices killed her.
I think a monitor is a slap in the face to me. She's going to pay for what she did to my son.
On January 17, 2024, a deeply troubling incident unfolded in Tampa, Florida, involving 42-year-old Michael Banks. Tensions in the home had been rising after Banks allegedly expressed inappropriate feelings toward his daughter. Concerned by his behavior, his mother and a family friend reportedly discussed asking him to leave the house. Authorities say that after overhearing their conversation, Banks reacted with anger and shot inside the home. In the chaos that followed, one woman lost her life and his mother was injured. He then proceeded to shoot his daughter, who was taking a shower at that time. The two escaped and called for help, with neighbors witnessing their distress.
So, Mr. Banks, since the state has filed a motion for pretrial detention, you will be held without bond on these charges until you go before that judge.
Police quickly responded to the scene, where Banks reportedly shot an officer before surrendering without further conflict. Banks was taken into custody.
There was two women. One of them had just a really long shirt over her front, and she was covered in from her head all the way down. Is just covering her everywhere.
He was charged with multiple offenses, including first-degree murder and attempted murder. Banks, who has a prior conviction from 2007 for aggravated battery, is now being held without bond pending further court proceedings. In 2012, Genna Ayup was fatally shot by her boyfriend, Ronald Corbin Jr., who claimed it was an accident while handling a weapon after drinking. Initially, authorities didn't press charges, but years later, after her family hired a private investigator, new findings led to the case being reopened and Corbin's indictment. Years later, in February 2022, Corbin accepted a plea deal and admitted to negligent homicide. During the sentencing, several family members gave emotional statements, recalling their pain and the impact of Genna's death.
You made choices that day, and now it's time you answer for them. You chose to drink. You chose to handle a deadly weapon without a care who was around. Your choices killed her.
Corbin, mostly silent during their remarks, he finally addressed the court.
Words can't express how much I love her and how much I miss her and how sorry I am she's not here. I am to blame for that, and I'm harder on myself than I think anybody could ever be.
He expressed remorse, acknowledged responsibility, and spoke of his commitment to caring for his son. A message from the boy was also shared, pleading for leniency and asking the judge not to imprison his father.
There's nothing I can do today that will bring back Genna. I only give a sentence that I feel is fair, appropriate, and consistent with the plea agreement and the law.
Despite the family's emotional appeals, the judge upheld the terms of the plea agreement and sentenced him to 3 years of probation, a decision that deeply disappointed Ayup's family, who had hoped for at least some jail time. On December 20th, 2024, Yakeem Lawler was tragically fatally stabbed in the parking garage of his apartment complex in Miami's Liberty City neighborhood. His ex-girlfriend, Jahara Malik, was present at the scene. Malik claimed the incident occurred while the two were horseplaying, and she later called 911, staying with Lawler until authorities arrived. Surveillance footage from the scene showed Malik dropping a knife near Lawler's body. He was found with a wound on the 3rd floor of the parking garage.
He was the ultimate competitor. You know, at anything he did, he loved everybody. Just the perfect kid in my eyes.
Initially, Malik was not arrested, sparking outrage and protest from Lawler's family, who demanded justice.
We're fighting for a greater purpose right now. We're trying to get justice.
On January 28, 2025, over a month after the incident, Malik was arrested and charged with manslaughter as an adult. Despite the serious charge, she was granted release on a $50,000 bond with GPS monitoring placed on her.
We believe that this is a totally unfortunate situation, but I don't believe that it's in the interest of justice for her to be taken back into custody.
Malik's attorney requested the removal of the monitoring device.
I want it removed due to the fact, as a student in school, there's a negative connotation with that.
I think a monitor is a slap in the face to me. She should be in jail. She's going to jail. She's going to pay for what she did to my son.
However, Lawler's mother was vehemently opposed to the decision, describing it as she called for Malik to remain behind bars until the trial. In response to objections from the victim's family, the state requested a pretrial detention hearing for Jahara Malik, which took place on February 6, 2025. Prosecutors presented evidence suggesting Malik posed a threat to the community, including a prior school fight and harmful text messages. As a result, the judge ordered level 1 house arrest, allowing Malik to leave only for school and attorney meetings. Lawler's family remains dissatisfied, pushing for her to be jailed until trial, which is scheduled for May 5, 2025. On December 20th, 2019, a deadly crash occurred on Shannon Road, in which 21-year-old Caitlin Festerling and 22-year-old Paul Garcia lost their lives. Jana Giron, 20, was driving a Buick when she crashed into Festerling's Acura, which was stopped to turn left. The collision sent the Acura into the path of an oncoming GMC pickup truck, resulting in the fatal crash. Investigations revealed Giron had been texting while driving, contributing to her failure to stop in time, leading to the charges of manslaughter, criminal damage, endangerment, and tampering with evidence. During the trial, Giron's defense argued that texting while driving should not be treated as criminal negligence.
This is a civil negligence case back in 2019, and it's still a civil negligence case because what the civil negligence standard is, sort of what the testimony was from Mr. Kleinberg, was that there's a duty of standard of care, there's a breach of that duty, there's a causal connection between the breach of the duty and an injury, and that there's damages. That's the civil negligence. Different from gross deviation, which is flagrant, extreme, outrageous, heinous, and egregious.
However, the prosecution highlighted the risks of texting while driving and argued that Giron's failure to pay attention while driving at high speed was reckless.
So we have all of these things indicating that she was not paying attention, not looking at the roadway. And it doesn't matter if at the moment she's actually sending the text, or she's actually reading the text, or she's putting it over in her purse and she's just not looking. The fact is that she's got this responsibility to operate this very large vehicle going at high rate speed, and she's not looking where she's going.
The judge dismissed the motion to dismiss the case, and on May 2, 2025, Giron was found guilty of 2 counts of negligent homicide and 1 count of endangerment, emphasizing the serious consequences of distracted driving. In 2022, Adam Cedillo, along with 2 accomplices, fired approximately 30 rounds at an SUV in a gas station parking lot near Interstate 25 and Comanche Road, killing 27-year-old Kayla Montano. The shooting was later determined to be a case of mistaken identity after 2 girls misinformed the shooters that someone in the SUV had robbed them. Cedillo pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. During his sentencing, Montano's family addressed the court, sharing their heartbreaking loss.
Kayla was on top of the world. She was planning her wedding. She was planning on having another child, and she was rebuilding her relationship with her child. She was even planning on going back to school. However, thanks to Adam Cedillo and his co-conspirators, instead of having a great time helping her plan the wedding, I got to help plan her funeral.
They described how Kayla, who had been planning her wedding and working on her relationship with her family, had her future abruptly taken from her. Instead of celebrating these milestones, her family was left to plan her funeral. Cedillo was ultimately sentenced to 10 years as part of her plea deal in the Department of Corrections. Murad Dervish, a former graduate student at the University of Arizona, was expelled in February 2022 after multiple incidents raised concerns about his behavior. He had been found in university buildings he wasn't authorized to be in, and his interactions with neighbors had become increasingly hostile, prompting police involvement. Dervish also faced eviction from his nearby residence due to unpaid rent. Despite these warning signs, his troubling actions continued. By October 2022, Dervish entered the University of Arizona's John W. Harshbarger building, disguised in a surgical mask and baseball cap. There, he shot and killed Professor Thomas Meixner, firing 11 rounds before fleeing the scene. Hours later, Dervish was apprehended by state troopers.
And moving forward, if you see something, say something. Part of the reason that this ended up moving so quickly is that somebody in the building recognized the student, knew they didn't belong in the building, and called the police immediately.
Dervish's neighbor highlighted the fact that his violent behavior was not unpredictable, as the officers suggest.
This was not unpredictable like some officers would like to claim. We could tell that Dervish was sort of on the breaking point for a while. Police had been called to his house multiple times, and it's just really unfortunate that someone had to die before anything was done.
During his trial, Dervish's defense argued that he was experiencing a psychotic episode at the time of the shooting. However, the prosecution presented evidence of premeditation, including the fact that Dervish had purchased a weapon a month before the incident.
Mr. Dervish, in a complaint charging you with first-degree murder and aggravated assault.
After a short deliberation, the jury convicted Dervish of first-degree murder and aggravated assault. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Following the sentencing, Meixner's wife, Kathleen, stated that although Dervish would spend the rest of his life behind bars, it couldn't bring her husband back. On June 21, 2022, James Sanchez was shot and killed at Black Horse HOA Park in Catalina, Arizona, during what authorities later determined to be a drug deal gone wrong. Sanchez had planned to meet with a group of individuals to sell THC vape cartridges. As he arrived with a friend, surveillance footage showed Joseph Nolan, his brother Drake, Paul Rodriguez, William Marley, and Richard Miller entering the park, some armed with weapons and wearing masks. After a brief exchange with Sanchez, shots were fired and Sanchez was hit. He died 2 days later in the hospital. The investigation revealed that the group, including Nolan, had planned to rob Sanchez, as evidenced by text messages and the discovery of vape cartridges in Sanchez's backpack. Nolan, who was charged with first-degree murder and aggravated assault, claimed he fired in self-defense, fearing for his life when he saw an AR-15 pointed at him and his brother. However, the prosecution argued that the group had intended to rob Sanchez.
So you still think this is a safe thing that you're doing at that time, when you're out in the basketball court and now your brother's talking about let's rob him?
He was joking. I 100% did not take him seriously.
Nolan was convicted on multiple charges, including murder, but was acquitted of armed robbery. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Other defendants in the case, including his brother Drake and Richard Miller, have been sentenced, while Paul Rodriguez and William Marley await trial. In February 2020, Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old black man, was fatally shot by 3 white men, Greg McMichael, Travis McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan, while he was out for a jog in the Satilla Shores neighborhood near Brunswick, Georgia. The killing initially went unpunished for over 2 months, which sparked outrage and brought attention to potential misconduct by local officials. Jackie Johnson, the Brunswick Judicial Circuit District Attorney at the time, was accused of using her influence to protect the McMichaels, particularly Greg McMichael, a former investigator in her office. It was alleged that Johnson had a role in preventing their arrest, and had even appointed a sympathetic prosecutor, George Barnhill, to handle the case, despite his prior involvement in advising police.
Counting on the justice system because they know it was a bunch of wrongdoing on their DA. Police.
Ahmaud Arbery's parents, particularly his mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, expressed their disappointment with the ruling, vowing to continue fighting for justice for their son. In September 2021, a grand jury indicted Johnson on charges of violating her oath of office and obstructing law enforcement. Her trial began in January 2025, with the prosecution presenting evidence, including phone records and a radio interview where Johnson denied interfering with the investigation.
The district attorney's role is somewhat of a check and balance on law enforcement and to advise them on the law. District attorneys cannot arrest. I did not talk to Glenn County Police that day.
On February 3rd, 2025, Judge John R. Turner ruled to dismiss the obstruction charge, citing a lack of sufficient evidence.
I think count 2 fails. There is not one scintilla of evidence that I've heard that would authorize a verdict on that count.
A few days later, on February 5th, 2025, Judge Turner also dismissed the remaining charge of violating her oath of office due to technical flaws in the indictment. This effectively ended the criminal case against Johnson. In April 1996, Federico Kiko Cruz committed a horrifying crime in Sparta, Michigan, when he killed David Crawford. Cruz's actions were shocking, and he recorded himself after the crime, capturing the disturbing aftermath.
I don't know if I'd call it ritualistic or satanic at this stage of the game, but it was bizarre to say the least.
In 1997, Cruz was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This sentence was later challenged when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life sentences for juveniles were unconstitutional.
I feel so horrible for the Crawfords because of the pain and suffering they have experienced because of what I did.
After serving 27 years, Cruz's life sentence was reconsidered, and in August 2023, he was granted parole. His release, scheduled for March 2025, has caused outrage in the community.
I saw some stuff in that situation that still sticks with me. You can't mentally heal from that. It's his fault. He doesn't need to be out. He doesn't need to be. There's no good that's gonna come from it.
Many, including neighbors who lived through the trauma, feel that Cruz should not be released.
It's just a kick in the gut when somebody can do something like that. David doesn't get a second chance, but Kiko does. And how is that? I never thought in a million years he would get out after what he did.
Some believe in second chances, while others, like former neighbor Jason Seagraves, feel that the justice system has failed, and Cruz's release is a mistake. The decision has divided the community, with ongoing debates about his redemption and whether he should be reintegrated into society. In March 2003, a devastating fire in Colorado Springs claimed the lives of one boy and two girls, Jay, Sophia, and Sierra, while their mother, Deborah Nichols, was at work. Initially, only Deborah's husband, Timothy Nichols, was implicated in the crime. However, in 2007, Deborah was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and child resulting in death.
No one loves my children as much as I do. I love them with every fiber of my being. I miss them every moment, every day. The enormity of my loss threatens to crush me every day.
The prosecution relied on a jailhouse informant's testimony that Timothy confessed to setting the fire with Deborah's help, allegedly using a flammable solvent called goof-off. Deborah was convicted in 2008 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. New evidence later disproved the informant's story, showing no traces of goof-off in the fire debris.
The chemical debris analysis shows that goof-off was not used in the fire, in the starting or the setting of the fire, or the accidental fire. There is evidence that a candle was lit and that it in fact could have burned down, and it could have been the start of the fire. It is very rare that cases are, that clients are given a new trial based on new evidence. But those cases do come along.
In 2019, with the support of the Corey Wise Innocence Project, Deborah's legal team filed a motion for a new trial, citing advancements in fire science and the discrediting of the prosecution's lead expert, Dr. John DeHaan, who had been expelled for inaccuracies in his forensic work. Deborah maintains her innocence, arguing that the fire was accidental and her conviction was based on flawed evidence. The case is currently under review, with Deborah fighting for a chance to prove her innocence in court. Malik Pryor, a 27-year-old man from San Antonio, was arrested in May 2022 after the body of his 39-year-old neighbor, Jared Poppin, was found in his apartment. Poppin was discovered with injuries, and there were signs of a violent altercation between the two. The pair had a history of conflicts, and it was suspected that Poppin had been forced into Pryor's apartment. Following the investigation, Pryor was charged with murder and held on a $150,000 bond. In January 2025, during a pretrial hearing, Pryor's defense attorney raised concerns about his client's mental competency.
He does have a history of mental illness. He actually was a high school football player that suffered many concussions. I have some concern about decompensation.
The attorney pointed to Pryor's history of mental health issues, including multiple injuries sustained while playing high school football.
Part of that report included that he continued his psychotropic meds to maintain competency. He's non-compliant on his meds at the jail. He's refusing to take them.
It was also revealed that Pryor had been non-compliant with his prescribed medications while in jail. As a result, Judge Joel Perez ordered a new mental health evaluation before proceeding with the trial. The case is now on hold until the evaluation is completed. If Pryor is found guilty, he faces a sentence of up to life in prison. In May 2011, Christine Metter, a divorced mother of 4, was locked in a bitter custody battle with her ex-husband, David Metter. Tensions escalated after the court granted David custody of one of their daughters due to concerns about her welfare. Emotionally overwhelmed and resentful, Christine confided in a former high school classmate, Patrick Sabo, through social media. What began as casual venting soon took a dark turn when Sabo jokingly suggested, "Save your money and hire a hitman." Though he meant it in jest, Christine responded with interest. Later that day, she contacted Sabo again and arranged a dinner meeting, this time including her father, Al Zombari. At that meeting, Zombari shockingly offered Sabo $50,000 to David Metter, even providing a photo and home address. Alarmed and disturbed, Sabo reported the incident to the police. Authorities quickly launched a sting operation, with Detective Christopher Bowerstock posing as a hitman. On June 3, 2011, Christine and her father met with the undercover officer and were shown a staged photo of David appearing. Believing the hit had been completed, both Christine and Zombari expressed satisfaction and were immediately arrested. At trial, Christine claimed she was unaware of any real plan and had tried to stop her father. The jury didn't buy it.
You had a long list of job titles. Well, you can add another job title to your resume. You're a convicted felon now in a heinous crime.
She was found guilty of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder and sentenced in February 2012 to 10 years in prison. Her father, who admitted his role, received a 9-year sentence. During the sentencing, David Metter gave an emotional statement.
I had not prepared anything for this morning, because quite frankly, I didn't think that I could get through it. I didn't think that I could even be here. My family never asked for this. My daughters never asked for this. My wife didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for this. My ex-wife was a good mother at one time, and she cared for our children at one time. But after our separation and after our divorce, there was a spiral of events that put my daughters in a position that I had no choice but to fight for them and continue to fight for them. And for that, I feel like that's why we're here. And I'll continue to fight for my daughters. My daughters, they miss their mom, but they are so horrified by what she did. What she did to us, what she did to me, what she did to them. The 2 years prior to this event, my daughters were spiraling. My twin daughters were not doing well educationally. They were not doing well physically. Since this event, as horrid as it is, my 8-year-old daughters are doing wonderfully. My daughter Nikki has gained over 10 pounds. She is socially unbelievably adept, where she was not that way prior. Our 13-year-old daughter is doing amazingly well in school after missing 30 days 1 year under my ex-wife's care. Our 16-year-old is doing so well socially and academically now. It's amazing. They're different people. And as much as I hated this, what's come out of it is amazing, that I feel like I can at least provide for my daughters in the life that they deserve. The thing that keeps us up at night, because we are still concerned for our safety, and when I say our safety, my wife and I, extremely concerned, because as much as everyone wants to condense this into 6 or 7 days, this was not a 6 or 7 day event. There were a number of things that led up to this that put us in this position. I cannot let my daughters go through any more of this. I do not want to put my family through any more of this. And in my statement, I asked for the maximum of 10 years. It's not because I don't like my ex-wife. It's not because I hate my ex-wife. It's because I love my kids. And that would allow my kids to grow up in an environment, a family environment, that is not toxic. It is not bad for them. It is good for them. It allows my 16-year-old daughter to get into her adult years and to be able to function the way that she should. It allows my 13-year-old daughter to get through college and function. And more importantly, it allows our 8-year-old twin daughters to be able to get through high school, graduate, and get into a position where they're in control of their lives, so that we can somewhat disappear, so that we don't have to be a part of this any longer. All we want to do is take care of our kids and be productive parents that care for them, that don't keep them out of school, that don't put them in positions of weakness, that put them in positions of strength, and that's where they are now. So, and I mean this when I say this, I reluctantly ask that she serves the time that she deserves to serve. Bye.
He described the trauma his daughters endured and how their lives were slowly recovering in a safer, more stable home. While he acknowledged Christine had once been a good mother, he made it clear that her actions left deep emotional scars. He asked the court for the maximum sentence, not out of vengeance, but to protect his daughters and give them space to heal and grow without fear. Christine Metter was released from prison in March 2021 and is currently on probation. Her father, Al Zumbari, died behind bars in 2018. David Metter now lives in Atlanta with his second wife and their daughters, working to rebuild the peaceful life they nearly lost. In April 2012, a quiet neighborhood in Farmington Hills, Michigan, was shaken by a horrifying act of violence. Mitchell Young, then 21, joined his friend Tucker Cipriano in what would become a brutal and deadly home invasion. Their target was Tucker's own family. Armed with bats, the two broke into the Cipriano household in the middle of the night. Inside the home were Tucker's father, Robert Cipriano, his mother, Rose, and his younger brother, Salvatore. The attack was swift and merciless. While Rose and Sal were left critically injured, barely surviving the assault.
They were talking to him about what happened after they had entered the house. And he had gotten in, he said he had gotten in through a window and he had let Mr. Young in through a door. And at that point he was attacked by the family dog, and it awakened the people in the house. And his father then came into the kitchen. And the detective says, so your dad comes down, he tells you guys to leave. You take a step to go leave, and then a fight breaks out? And Mr. Cipriano says, yeah, because I look behind me, and my dad, all I see is my dad, like, here's the door right by the kitchen, where they're walking in. Here's that door to the outside where Roderick is Mitchell Young, was hiding over in the corner under the coats and shit. And my parents are walking down here. Question, did your dad see Roderick at this point? Apparently he did, because when I turned around, he's like over here, looking like this over in the corner. And I'm like, I knew something was going to happen when he was like, get the hell out of my house. Then it turned. At this point he says, so the first part of the fight was more physical, or did Roderick come out from behind with the baseball bat swinging? And Mr. Cipriano says, I don't think he ever hit him with just the bat. Okay, and you grabbed your dad? And Mr. Cipriano says, yeah. And he started hitting him in the head, and Mr. Cipriano says, yeah. And he hit him a bunch of times, and Mr. Cipriano says, a bunch. And then the detectives ask, when did he fall? Your dad fall? Did he hit him while he was on the ground or just while he was standing? And Mr. Cipriano replies, I think he hit him on the ground too. The final exhibit is exhibit number 6, and it's the autopsy of Robert Cipriano that was done by Dr. Ortiz-Reyes on the following day, that is April the 17th of 2012, and that is exhibit 6 here. And under evidence of injury of head and neck Dr. Ortiz-Reyes describes many injuries to Mr. Cipriano, including a linear fracture of the head extending from the right parietal to the occipital bone to the left parietal. So the skull is cracked all the way across the back. There is a fragmented fracture of the left side of the head, including the left parietal and occipital bones. There are multiple fractures of both anterior fossa of the skull. That's the part above the eyes. Dr. Ortiz-Reyes also documents brain and several lacerations to the scalp, and he ends his opinion by saying, Robert Cipriano, a 52-year-old white male, of multiple blunt force head trauma sustained when he was assaulted by another person or persons. There was no natural disease contributing to his death. In consideration of the circumstances of this autopsy findings and toxicological analysis, the manner of death is homicide.
Both Young and Cipriano were arrested shortly after. During the investigation, it became clear that the two had discussed robbing and Tucker's family to steal money for drugs. Evidence showed they purchased synthetic marijuana and had even practiced swinging the bats before the crime. Young was charged with first-degree premeditated murder, felony murder, assault with intent to commit murder, and armed robbery. Despite pleading not guilty, he was convicted on all charges.
Your Honor, again, please the court, Mitchell Rivera. The statements of Mr. Skrinsky are accurate. There is no plea bargain or plea agreement with the prosecutor's office. Mr. Cipriano is freely and voluntarily going to enter a plea of no contest to count 2, that is felony murder. And obviously, should the court accept that plea, then whatever the prosecutor's office decides to do is on the prosecutor's office. The record should reflect that Tucker and I have discussed this matter at length. We've talked about it on numerous occasions, not just this morning. We spent hours together. This is his choice. I've tried to discuss with him both the pros and cons of what's going on in the trial and the pros and cons of him going forward and pleading to felony murder. And if I may, I'm asking permission of the court that I be allowed to voir dire Mr. Cipriano before you take the plea, so we can put certain things on the record to make sure that he's clear with what he's doing and there's no issue with respect to the court having to accept the plea if that's what the court chooses to do.
Yes, please swear. Stand. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you have offered shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, ma'am. Can you state your name, please?
Tucker Robert Cipriano.
Okay. Tucker, you and I have been involved in this case since really shortly after April 15th of 2012. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we've consulted with each other over the course of the last little over a year, correct?
Yes.
And in the last couple of weeks, you came to me and you talked about potentially entering a plea to the charges containing the information that are pending against you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you and I talked about what the government would have to do to prove the case. They'd have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, they're presumed innocent, and you don't have to do anything. The obligation is on them to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. You understand that?
Yep.
Okay. You also understand, should you enter a plea of either no contest or guilty to the charge of first-degree felony murder, that you will go to prison for the rest of your life.
Yes, sir.
You will not be paroled.
Yes, sir.
You will be in prison.
Yes, sir.
The only way you'll get out of prison is if the President of the United States gives you a pardon or the governor commutes your sentence. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
And the chances of that happening are probably slim to none.
Yes, sir.
So you're willing to accept the rest of your life in prison and take a plea?
Yes, sir.
You and I have gone through your constitutional and statutory rights. Is that correct?
Yep.
You filled out a form?
Yep.
You understand you have a right to have a trial?
Yep.
Trial by jury?
Yep.
That you're presumed innocent unless the prosecutor can prove you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yep.
That any witnesses against you, you can confront, look at them, have me or you cross-examine them?
Yep.
Any witnesses you want, the judge will subpoena them? Okay. All right?
Yep.
Okay, you're willing to give up all the rights that are contained in that particular document?
Yeah.
Has anybody forced you to do this?
No.
Has anybody coerced you to say you have to do this?
No.
Is this your own free choice?
Yes, it is.
You understand if you're sitting in prison and 10 years from now, you say, gee, I shouldn't have done this, or, you know, why did my lawyer talk me out of it? You're stuck. You're there.
Yep.
And you want to go forward.
Yep.
And nothing for it.
In June 2013, Tucker Cipriano pleaded no contest to first-degree murder, a plea treated as a guilty admission for sentencing purposes. At his sentencing in July 2013, he expressed remorse. Judge Shalina Kumar sentenced Cipriano to life in prison without the possibility of parole, emphasizing the tragedy of a young man destroying a loving family. Meanwhile, in the same month, Young's sentencing took place. Young expressed sorrow for what the Cipriano family had endured. However, he maintained his innocence in the crime, insisting that he was wrongfully convicted.
I never intended for any of this to happen. And every day I deeply regret the fact that I was unable to stop it. I never once thought that my association with Tucker Cipriano would lead to an event like this. That being said, I once again want to state that I am not guilty of the 5 crimes I am to be sentenced for today, and I do intend to file for my appeal as soon as possible following the conclusion of this hearing. Now I'm going to cover some, but not all, of the issues that I intend to raise on my appeal, and I ask you all to please keep in mind that while some of what I have to say may seem motivated by anger or frustration, it's not my intent in any way to be inflammatory, merely to point out the things that I feel strongly represent a miscarriage of justice in this courtroom. Starting with the fact that I was not provided with, nor did I have an opportunity to examine all of the documents, photographs, and other paperwork that the prosecution intended to produce against me at trial, despite my request per MCR 6.201. I was not provided with the opportunity to inspect all tangible physical evidence that the prosecution intended to produce against me at trial, despite my request per MCR 6.201. I was not provided with any criminal record of all the witnesses the prosecution produced or intended to produce against me, despite my request to the same MCR. This list continues further, but in short, I was not allowed the opportunity to properly prepare my defense due to the lack of information in the discovery with which I was provided. I do not know why I was not provided with this information, but the why does not change the fact that my requests for information that I had every legal right to were completely ignored. And this brings me to the subject of Michael McCarthy, my court-appointed attorney, and I would like to thank you, Michael, for the things that you had to say on my behalf. They were very kind, but unfortunately I also do have to bring to attention, I do have to bring to attention that I'm not satisfied completely with the counsel that you have provided me. I believe there were many things that should have been done that weren't. As Michael McCarthy said, he and I have met countless times over the course of this case where I expressed my concerns and expectations involved in my defense. Unfortunately, these expectations were not met. I presented Michael with the names of witnesses who I wished to be called to testify on my behalf at trial, and to my knowledge, Michael did not so much as interview these individuals, and my request went ignored. During our meetings, I brought to Michael's attention numerous points that I wished for him to present at trial, and despite his assurances to me at the time, he neglected to address many of these issues. Among these were the defenses that I requested that he present. These included abandonment, claim of right, duress, and the mere presence defense. Of the 4 defenses that I found to apply to my circumstances, all of which were agreed to at the time of my request, only mere presence and duress were presented. When I questioned Michael on this at trial, he remarked to me that at that time nothing could be done about it. In doing this, he impeded upon my constitutional right to present my defense. No witnesses were called in my defense. My requests for various types of expert witnesses went ignored. No defense exhibits were prepared whatsoever for the jury. Witnesses were not confronted on multiple contradictions and inconsistencies that were present in their testimony. Points that I practically harped Michael on that were key in my defense were entirely neglected, and timely objections were not made where they were due. It is for all of these reasons compiled together that I submit that I was not given effective assistance of counsel. I don't believe that I was treated fairly or impartially during the course of this trial or the proceedings that led to it. Everything down to the prosecution's closing arguments and the overtly suggestive and inflammatory nature of the visual presentation they presented denied me any hope of a fair trial and engineered what I consider to be a strong miscarriage of justice. I had great potential and a multitude of opportunities at my fingertips for establishing a constructive and successful future for myself.
Young claimed his defense was inadequate and that his attorney failed to properly represent him. He said he wasn't given access to important documents, wasn't allowed to participate fully in his defense, and believed the trial had been unfair. According to Young, witness testimonies were inconsistent and his concerns were ignored. Judge Shalina Kumar responded firmly. While she acknowledged Young's troubled upbringing, including a physically and emotionally abusive stepfather and possible mental health struggles, she made it clear that these factors did not excuse his actions.
Mr. Young, for the record, I want to acknowledge that you did not have the loving, supportive home life that Mr. Cipriano had. And I want to acknowledge that. I understand you had a very emotionally and physically abusive stepfather, and that is horrific for a child to suffer. And I do wish your stepfather was here today so I could explain to him his role in this whole event, because abuse is a cycle, and I do think that that has played a role in what you have turned into. I also understand that there is some sort of maybe mental disease that you suffer from, and I'm sure that has played a role as well. I'm not sure how much of what we've heard today or your actions have to do with a mental disease or that you are a very manipulative person. It's probably a little bit of both, in my opinion. Your absolute refusal to acknowledge any of your decisions or your activities in this event, your absolute refusal to take any responsibility is really unbelievable to me. You are clearly a very intelligent young man. You absolutely, without a doubt, know wrong from right. And you are very critical of Mr. Zinderman, but Mr. Zinderman was smart enough to walk away that night, knowing what the two of you were likely to do. You did not use your intellect, as Mr. Zinderman did, to walk away that night. And you could have, and you should have, and you chose not to. And you are not someone who does not know right from wrong. I do not believe the things that you are saying. I absolutely believe that you did this, you made decisions to do this, you played a significant role in this. As for Mr. McCarthy, he is an excellent attorney, and I don't think there is an attorney that could have done a better job defending you, for the record. So you need to take a look in the mirror and really take responsibility for the decisions that you've made, because you're right, you had a lot going for you. You could have been a lot in life, but you're not going to be because of your own decisions, not Mr. Cipriano's decisions, not Mr. Zinderman's decisions, not anybody else's decisions. They were your decisions. You made the decisions on your own, and you were smart enough to know better. So you have ruined your own life, along with the life of the Cipriano family. You were convicted of first-degree murder on two theories, that being first-degree premeditated murder and first-degree felony murder. There is one sentence imposed of natural life without parole. There's 464 days jail credit. On counts 3, 4, and 5, 23 years to 60 years, 464 days jail credit. Crime victim's right fee of $130, attorney fees to be determined, state cost of $340. You must comply with DNA testing. You're to have no contact or association with the victims, Rosemary, Tanner, Isabella, and Salvatore Cipriano. You're to have no contact or association with the co-defendant, Tucker Cipriano. You do have the right to Court of Appeals for leave to appeal. Attorney's going to hand your appellate rights form. If you want an attorney appointed for your appeal, you must return the form in this court within 42 days of today's date.
She noted that Young was intelligent, capable of understanding right from wrong, and had multiple chances to walk away from the situation. She condemned Young's refusal to take responsibility and described his behavior as manipulative. In the end, Mitchell Young was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The court also imposed additional prison terms for the assault and robbery charges. In March 2020, a tragic incident unfolded on Middlebridge Road in South Kingstown, Rhode Island, when 33-year-old Kara Kenyon, a physical therapist, drove under the influence and struck 54-year-old Alan Albergaria, who was walking along the road. The impact proved fatal. Kenyon remained at the scene and was later arrested. That night, a man lost his life, a family lost their center, and a woman's life took a dark turn from which there was no easy return. Kenyon was charged with driving under the influence, resulting in death. Alan Albergaria was a beloved father, grandfather, and husband. His sudden death sent shockwaves through his family, who spent nearly 3 years grappling with their grief while waiting for the case to move forward. His daughter, Cassandra Phillips, shared in court that her father's absence left a permanent hole in their lives.
I've gone over and over what I wanted to say today and how I should say it, but there's no amount of words that could capture the impact that your choice to drink and drive had on me and so many people, and we're here, and now I realize that the impact is pretty obvious because so many people are here. I'm standing here thinking that he's gonna walk through the doors and just smile, that gotcha smile, you know, that he used to have. And I wonder, like, when is this gonna end? When is this nightmare gonna end? I think you probably wonder the same thing. From the moment I received the phone call that my dad was killed, my world flooded with grief, fear, and uncertainty. That night, as my sweet newborn baby slept, I silently wept and packed her belongings to fly to Rhode Island to be with my family. The hardest feeling was the urge to call him. He was my rock and my biggest supporter. He was always there through every hard thing I went through, and every part of me just wanted to pick up the phone and tell him what happened. I still get that feeling. I want to pick up the phone and call him, and then I have that earth-shattering realization that I'll never speak to him again. When my dad was killed, my first daughter, Alana, was just 3 months old. Losing him filled my experience as a new mom with heartache, loss, and fear, and I can't help but wonder how different that experience would have been if he were here. I've seen social media posts that you've made, and when I see them, my heart wrenches. I know that you have a supportive dad, and mine will ever be here to support me through the things that I go through or to watch his grandchildren grow. He won't be here to hold my stepmom again. My little brother was only 12 when he and he's without his dad forever. My children and my baby nephew won't ever know him, and he would have adored them. Every family event, every holiday, every milestone is a reminder that he's not here to share our joy, so that even happy moments are tinged with grief and the terrifying reminder that someone can take the life of someone you love unexpectedly and completely out of your control. Sometimes I live in fear that I'll get the call that another person that I love has been tragically lost. My dad was the strongest person I knew. He took care of us. He took care of our entire family, all of his friends, his employees, their families, anybody that crossed paths with him, he took care of. I remember the night that he took care of us and hired a driver when we went out. And the night that he booked a hotel on New Year's Eve to take care of us. He was the strongest man that I know. And if he could be taken in such a violent, unexpected way, then anyone could too. At my father's wake, I could see the edge of the fabric used to patch his head injury, and I thought, how could my daddy's head be so fragile? And at first, and sometimes still, I'm haunted by the idea that someone's head could just smash. I'd look at my tiny new daughter and think, if my dad's life could be taken so quickly and violently and unexpectedly, then what could happen to her? The fear was crushing and debilitating. Sometimes I get in the car and I can't help thinking it might be my last time I see my girls, and it's terrifying and real, and it takes everything in my power to just keep going forward. Because my dad was in an instant completely outside of our control. It was shelter in place. We were all learning to cope with a new way of life and uncertainty, and going for walks is one of the ways that helped me cope. And after my dad was killed, I couldn't go for a walk without thinking at any moment a car was going to hit us. When a car passed, my heart would start to pound and my eyes would fill with tears, and I'd have to fight the urge not to run home or run into the grass with the stroller and just shrink to the ground, because I was reminded all over again of how he died. With my dad, even when I felt like the world was falling apart, he made me feel like everything was going to be okay.
She described the anguish of knowing her father would never walk her down the aisle. The pain of losing him, she said, was worsened by the fact that it wasn't a random accident. It was a decision, a choice made by someone who should have known better. Alan's wife recalled their pandemic bond through simple joys, only for it to be shattered when she found him the street. She painfully informed their son, Mason, and her older son had to clean his father's blood to shield the younger one. The family was left devastated by a preventable tragedy.
Alan was my husband. During the pandemic, we stayed home to be safe. In that time, Alan discovered that he loved doing puzzles and helping me cook. Days later, he would be gone forever. I would be running down the street to see my husband in the middle of the road with paramedics giving him chest compressions. I screamed to him, thinking somehow he could hear me and come back to us. But then I saw the pools of blood around his head, and I knew that our lives would never be the same. Having to go home and tell our 12-year-old son that his father was hit by a car and that we had to go to the hospital was soul crushing, knowing that he was gone already. Mommy, I'm scared. Is Daddy going to be all right? Mason, Daddy is super strong, and he's going to fight to be with us. But no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. The whole time trying not to give my son too much false hope, because he was already gone. On the way to the hospital, I wasn't even able to hold his hand because we had to go in the police car and it's plexiglassed off, so he just kept asking me if he was going to be okay, and I kept trying to falsely reassure him. I thank God that some of my family got to the hospital in time to help me give Mason the news and be there for me so I could make the most difficult phone calls to my oldest son and daughter to tell them about their dad. It was Mason's older brother, Alan Lewis, who washed his father's off the street so Mason and I didn't have to see it. The second time he had to go back with bleach because there was a neighborhood dog licking the pavement, and it was so disturbing that. Thank you for us. The removal of my husband's and brain matter from the road was not enough. Living there, only a couple of houses down from where Alan was struck, was debilitating. Just going out to the front of the house to get to the mail became too much to handle. Because of this, we decided to sell the house. A home that was built by Alan's grandparents and had been in his family for over 50 years. I had to move closer to my sister because now I'm a single parent. And not only does Mason not have one living grandparent, now he has no father. My daughter, Cassie, tells me that I'm not a single mother. I'm a widow, but this doesn't make me feel any better.
On January 23, 2023, Kenyon stood before a judge and pleaded guilty. Before sentencing, she addressed the court in a tearful and heartfelt apology.
This statement is the hardest thing I've ever had to write, and my life would be a vast understatement. There are so many victims present in this courtroom today, those of whom became victims because of my actions on the night of March 27th, 2020. I want you to know that there has not been a single day that has passed since that terrible night that I have not thought of your family and the hell you were living. I know the pain and anger you feel towards me has probably only increased with time, with the time it has taken to get to this day. I want you to know that I never took for granted the fact that I was home with my family while you were grieving and awaiting justice. My husband and I struggled deeply with the decision to have my son after such tragedy occurred. And I want you to know that my decision to do so was in no way due to lack of understanding or empathy towards you and what you have endured. Every piece of my heart is absolutely shattered by the idea of being away from my rainbow baby and stepdaughter for a second of their lives. But I know I need to take responsibility for my uncharacteristic decision that night. I've always been taught to take responsibility for my actions, and I want to do so understanding the consequences. My stepdaughter was 11 at the time of the accident, very close in age to your husband's son. This will forever haunt me. The realization that my decision has caused children to grow without a father, a wife, to live without a husband, grandbabies, to grow up without knowing their grandfather is something I can never forgive myself for. I need you to know that while it can never be an excuse or an explanation, I was not myself that night. I made a terrible and emotional decision that goes against all that I have worked for and stood for in the past. I've devoted my life to caring for and rehabilitating others as a physical therapist. The day following that horrible night, I lost my job and thought I'd never be able to help patients again. I've worked for the last year and a half with geriatric patients with the ultimate hope of getting them home to their loved ones. I am so sorry for what I've taken from you. I'm accepting this sentence with great sadness, but also an understanding of the fact that on March 27th, your family and friends were given a life sentence without your loved one and without choice. I know there is much anger that you hold towards me. It's important to me that this horrible tragedy be the negative catalyst for safeguard and change. I saw your statement on the news about the importance of interlock safety systems. I need you to know that I will do all in my power to support safety changes like that, to allow for others to not repeat my mistakes and to prevent other families on both sides of tragedy of this nature from the crippling grief. I strongly and sincerely hope that some small speck of positive change can come from the unbearable pain you've had to endure. In addition to auto safety features, I feel it's important to provide mental health awareness, especially for those who seem not to need it. I refuse to make excuses for my decision, but I will give explanation if and when you're willing and allow me to do so. I'm so sorry for the role I played in the choices I made that night. I will continue to pray for you, your family, and your friends every day. I realize that I could never have the right words to formulate the immensity of the apology you deserve. But I hope you know how deeply regretful I am. I see you, I hear you, and I am incredibly empathetic for the pain that I have caused.
She acknowledged the pain she caused, saying not a day had passed without her thinking of Alan Albergaria and the family left behind. She expressed deep remorse for her actions, admitted full responsibility, and said she would carry the guilt with her forever. Kenyon was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with 7 years to serve and the remainder suspended with probation. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.